Well, there you are, Team Healthy. How are you guys doing today? I hope we're going to do better than last week. Y'all remember last week, just a few minutes into the live feed, my screen started goofing up. The gremlins got in there. We've been having some new construction in our neighborhood here. And the guy that came in and finally came last week and helped me out said, yeah, they keep turning on these updates and all of that, and that goose things up. And then I have to call the technician guys. I hope we're okay this week. Let's hope so. And thanks for hanging in there. Okay, just on a little programming note, I noticed some of you have already commented on Dr. George Simon's interview yesterday that I uploaded. I'm doing my podcast, and some of the times I just comment on topics that I have maybe spoken to on other videos, but I elaborate on them, and so it's just me. Other times now, I'm trying to find some interviews that would be beneficial to you. And what we're going to do is, I've noticed it's very popular to put some of those podcast interviews by way of videos onto the YouTube channel. I love talking to Dr. Simon. He was such a good guy, and we have some mutual friends too, so that makes it easier. And then a couple weeks before that, we had Shannon Thomas, and she's well known, and I was so pleased to have her. And I think it's in 3 weeks we're going to have another fellow named Adrian Terry, who's a longtime friend of mine. He's a businessman, and he's going to be talking about leadership styles versus narcissism. And we're going to have more as we come along. So I know those are appealing to you. So I'm listening to you, and we're going to just keep going with it. Okay. Um, Today we're zeroing in on this topic. How much should you defend yourself with a narcissist? We have so many questions that go along with this. And by the way, those of you who are new know that I collect questions that come in, and then this is what the live feed is for. And so if you have questions, you can either put them in the chat on the side here if you're looking live. Most of you are going to be watching tape. Go ahead and put them in the comment section. I'll pick up on them. Obviously, I can't answer all of them, but we're going to zero in on ones that I hope are representative of where some of you may be. When we ask about how much should you defend yourself with a narcissist, we already have a starting point there. And the starting point is narcissists can sure be offensive. They just can keep coming after you on a wide array of issues. And the timing, can be pretty rotten, but there they are. And so as you are onto them and as you call them out, or as you find yourself clashing with them, then they have the presumption that you better have a good defense, or I'm just going to make it miserable. And so many times when you're with a person that's dysregulated, like that narcissistic person, you find yourself kind of leaning back on your heels thinking, well, what do I say next? And how can I explain myself in ways that's going to make matters better? And you don't. Let's keep in mind who your audience is. Narcissistic individuals have a pathologically need to be in control over you. And when you come along and say, well, what if I don't want to be controlled by you? I have a different explanation. Then they're going to just double down. It's like, well, let me explain to you why you're stupid and I'm not. And so we're going to kind of get into some of that. And it so helps for you to know their offensiveness, their badgering of you, their rejection of you is far more of a commentary about who they are than it is about who you are. So I hope that you can hold on to that for all it's worth. Now, the first question, I put this one up first because I can just tell when this person was writing it, there's a certain writhing, there's a certain agony that this person is in, and I wonder how many of you can share that same sentiment. The first person asked the question, what if you are guilty of the things the narcissist accuses you of doing? All right, let's just pause right there. Let's get a show of hands. How many of you have responded to a narcissist in ways that aren't all that great, and you don't like the way that they drew a reaction out of you, or you may have erred and then they're just going to park on it? You know what I'm talking about? And once a narcissist gets wind of your flaws, or your there goes the hands way up. then they're just going to keep coming after you. So this person asked the question, what if you really are guilty of having done some things wrong? And then this person goes on, but then what if you've owned your mistake, you've apologized for your wrongs, you've made amends, but the narcissist persists and throws it up in your face when you're not giving in to their demands? Oh, and that is so common. Do we have to continue to pay for our mistakes for the rest of our lives, despite the work that we've done to be a better person? Now, the first thing that we want to acknowledge when you see that you're on the receiving end of this narcissist accusations is narcissists have a really short memory when it comes to their own imperfections, when it comes to their own humanity and their own confusion. It's like, I don't remember much of that stuff. But when it comes to you and your humanity and your mistakes, it's like, oh, I've got a great memory. In fact, I can remember things, well, yesterday, 2 minutes ago, 50 years ago, whatever I need, I'll dredge it up. And it's amazing how they forget their own, but they certainly will zero in on you. Uh, do you understand what I mean with that? And I'm sure that many of you have. Narcissists need a foil. You see, part of their defensive nature is their offensiveness. And so, narcissists themselves, if they had the capacity for true self reflection and then an honesty that goes along with it, which therein lies the problem, they would say, you've made mistakes. I've made mine too. And there would be a willingness to say, why don't we team together? Why don't we put our shared humanity out there and let's just look real hard at what it means and how we can know each other better and how we can assist one another in the growth mode. Um, One of the things that I talk with people about is you can tell about a person's level of maturity, not necessarily by the mistakes they make, although some of them are pretty crummy, but you can tell most about a person's level of maturity and the character that they have by the way they respond in the aftermath of their mistakes. I start with the presumption that nobody is going to manage life ideally all the time. And so there are going to be times when you blunder. There are going to be times, and it can be a single episode. It can be a segment of time in your life. It can be certain people that you're with. But there are going to be times when it's like, ooh, I was not at my finest. Then the question is, well, do you have the ability to grow? Narcissist is like, no, I don't need to know that stuff. Going back, they need a foil. They need you to be negative. They need you to be inept. So why? So that you won't look at my ineptitude. The more I can keep you in a defensive posture, then the better off I'm going to be. And so they're going to keep coming at you. And there's this ultimate hypocrisy where they just simply will not allow you to be anything other than what you are. They will not forgive and they just keep trying to put you down. That's their need. If you, to this person that's asking the question, if you say, I was guilty of some things, and the narcissist is more than happy to remind me, but at some point when you say, just like what this person did, but I've done my work, and I'm being honest with myself. I'm making amends. I'm making adjustments. I'm in a growth process. By the way, we call that your actualization process, and I'm doing the best that I can. At some point, you get to act like a forgiven person. Okay. The narcissist knows nothing about that, but you get to act as a forgiven person. And when we say forgiven, it means that your ledger is clean. It doesn't mean that you don't have a limp sometimes that you walk with. It doesn't mean that you never have regrets. But at some point, it's like, I get to go ahead and claim the rest of me that's good and decent, and I get to be glad that even when I've made mistakes, I'm quite able and capable and willing to learn from them. And when the narcissist says, "Well, I'm not impressed," my reaction to that is, I realize that you keep reminding me that you're not impressed, but you see, I don't require you to be impressed with me. They want to be in the superior position, which means they have to have someone in the low position, and that someone would be you. Now, another question that's somewhat similar to this person says, can victims of narcissistic abuse also have strong negative emotional reactions to not being affirmed by others due to the frustration of having not been heard or seen? So in other words, yeah, I've been abused. I've had this sense that says you don't care about me, you don't see me, you don't understand me, and is it possible for you to have strong and negative reactions? And the answer is, well, yeah, it's normal. And right there, the fact that you're asking, is it normal for me to have the emotional reaction that I do? It already implies the narcissist has gotten into your head. You can't feel frustrated. You can't feel hurt. You're not allowed to protest. Sometimes when you're particularly when you use that word abuse, when you've been abused, you've been treated in a disdainful kind of way with contempt. There's some sort of harm. I don't know if we're talking about physical abuse or emotional and mental abuse. Yes, it hurts and it's okay. In fact, it would be weird for you not to have the emotional reaction that you have. And then this person goes on to ask the question, can affirmation seeking be a narcissistic flea? Okay, now I don't know how many of you are familiar with that term, narcissistic flea. Uh, I'm kind of assuming that it comes from the old proverb, you lie with dogs and you get fleas. So when you hang around with narcissists, you pick up on some of the things that are common to them. For example, the narcissist has a bad temper. Well, you wind up having a bad temper in reverse. The narcissist is argumentative. Well, you wind up bickering and arguing. You don't want to, but there you are. That means you're picking up their fleas. Or they may be defensive and you find yourself being defensive. That's what we're talking about when we talk about having narcissistic fleas. And so when this person asked the question, can affirmation seeking be a narcissistic flea? The answer is, yeah, it could be. But some of the other things that I mentioned about being argumentative and all that, that can be part of your dysregulation. The desire for affirmation is not weird. Now, narcissists in their craving for affirmation, they want more than affirmation. They want the position of honor. They want to be admired. They want to be adored in an inordinate kind of way where they can walk away saying to themselves, "See, I really am the special one here." And so it could be that you might mimic that. And if that's the case, then that would be a narcissistic flea. But simply for you to say, well, I know that I'd like to be affirmed. That's not you just mimicking the narcissist. That's a normal desire. On the day you were born, as soon as you entered the world, you started screaming and said, "Hey, get over here and take care of me." The need for affirmation, the need for care, the need for nurturance is as old as your life. Okay, that's just part of the human condition. Now, the question is, before you receive the affirmation of other individuals, I would ask you, well, can you affirm yourself? And can you acknowledge, well, whether this dysregulated person gets it or not? I understand me and I affirm me and I give myself permission to be precisely what I am, which in the case of me, of Les Carter, it means, well, I'm a mixed bag. I do a lot of things right. I do some things wrong. And I affirm the fact that I am what I am and I'm in a growth trajectory. Narcissists can't say things like that. So for you to say, well, I wish somebody would, that's reasonable, but you don't want to just be desperate about it. And so the way to minimize your desperation is for you to remind yourself of who you are. And if your character is decent, if your response to some of your negatives is honesty and growth and adjustment, keep moving forward and know that your growth exposes a narcissist's commitment to contempt. Okay. I hope you understand that. Your growth exposes a narcissist's commitment to contempt. It's like, I don't want you to grow. I need you to stay down. I need you to be reminded of how awful you are. I need that. That's on them. And so let them have their need, let them have their reaction, keep growing and keep affirming yourself and be glad of it. And then I'm hoping you can be around some people like we have here on Team Healthy who will say, hey, I'm one of those flawed, imperfect people. I'd like to love you. And I'd like for you to love me, and let's encourage each other in the growth direction together. There are people who can do that. I'm hoping you can be one of those, and I'm hoping you can connect with people who think that way. I mean, I believe that so down to the core of my being. One of the things that just bugs the living daylights out of me is when I hear so many stories, and I know a lot of dirt on a lot of people. Let's just put it this way. And when I know people who have their own baggage and their own difficulty, and I just see them having this condescending attitude towards others, it's like, what are you doing? Why do you feel the need to do that? Just go ahead and accept that others have their humanity just as you do. The narcissist is like, no, you need to defend yourself, but I don't. And it's like, all right, that's your double standard. I'm not buying into it. Okay, I got another one here, and I thought this would be a good one to throw in with the holiday season coming up and all, because I know gift giving and stuff like that comes along. This person says, "Is it okay to send a small gift to a narcissist who has discarded you some time ago?" And then in parentheses, without comment, if you want to let them know that you don't hate them. All right. I'm going to make a really strong assumption that this question was sent in by one of the nicest people you'd have ever met. The person who's an empath, they want to tune in. It's like, I don't want there to be enmity, and I don't want there to be strife and strain and difficulty. I'd like to just keep the door open if I can, or at the very least, I'd like to give a message that says, we can be good. I know that you're mad. And so I'd like to send you a little gift. And so the person asked, is it okay to send that small gift? And my answer is, yeah, I guess. I mean, don't break the bank on it. But it also says this person is the one who discarded you without comment, which to me, that's just such a chicken way to do it. And that's what they did to you. And here you are thinking, well, I still want to, patch things up. The one question I would have you ask yourself is, what are you wanting to accomplish? If you're wanting to get that person to adjust and change their opinion of you, that's a nice goal, but don't hold your breath on that. I don't think that giving a pleasant gift or sending a card is going to uh, change the narcissist. Or if you're simply doing it because you like yourself and the fact that you're that way, okay, I can go along with that. And it's like, if that kind of clears your mind, all right. But just be extremely realistic about what is going to be accomplished. If it's for your own healing, okay. But if it's for the thought that says, now maybe things will get a little bit better between me and that person, oh, wouldn't that be nice? But I mean, it's not bad, but just have very low expectations. Okay. All right. This person, and speaking of taking the defensive posture, and by the way, that question about giving gifts, that is itself a defensive kind of thing. I don't want them to think badly about me, and don't make it about them thinking badly about you. Just make it about your character. Period. End of discussion on that. Okay, this next question. This person says, do you have any advice for telling a narcissist that they won't be getting something they demand, and then defending the reasons for that? So you have a narcissist who has these demands. Now, this person didn't explain if this was a demand for something physical, like I want you to buy me this product, or if it's something in your schedule, I want you to rearrange your calendar for me, or if it's something emotional, I want you to have a feeling toward me, or a preference that shows that you're on my team. They didn't say what it was, but the narcissist is being demanding, and you've decided, I'm not willing or interested in giving them what they want. So how do you defend yourself when they demand reasons? You know, First of all, if somebody demands something like that, it's like, all right, you, you already lost your right to hear from me. It's like obligation, demand, duty. That's not a good motive. And by the way, I have a video coming up on obligation and duty, and the dread that goes along with that. That's coming up in a couple of weeks. Um, okay, let's suppose that you decide, well, I am going to explain myself. Do it once. Here's the reason I made this decision. Here's the reason I'm not giving you what you're demanding, this is the backdrop for it. Okay, do it once, and explain your reasoning that goes along with it succinctly, and then expect blowback. Very, very, did I say very rarely will a narcissist listen to your explanations for your decisions and then come back and say, that was really enlightening. Thank you. No, when you give an explanation, most narcissists, even as you're speaking, and you can sometimes feel it as the words are coming out of your mouth, they're already thinking, how can I rebut what this person is saying to me? And you haven't even finished your sentence. That's what's common. And so, yeah, do you explain yourself once, but then expect blowback? And then I'm hoping, and this goes back to what I said just a moment ago, I'm hoping you can move forward knowing that you didn't do what the narcissist thinks you're supposed to do, but you still feel pretty good about who you are. Don't make the narcissist's opinion of you to be the ultimate determinant as to whether you're going to be okay today or not. Narcissists are grumps. It doesn't take much to put them in a bad mood. And if you come along and say, well, I happen to be unique and different, it's like, okay, that put me in a bad mood. It's like, no, again. And know your audience, know yourself. And when you're okay with yourself, let's let that be enough. Now, taking it a little bit further, another person asked a question. Okay, before I get to this question, another show of hands, how many of you have been on the receiving end of some sort of crummy name uh, that you've been called because you didn't do the right thing? And so here comes the name calling and blaming and all of that. Okay, more of that, right? This person says, my sister calls me a drama. There's the hands going up again. My sister calls me a drama queen for asking about things that happened in our past. I don't remember much of our past, so that's why I asked what happens. So here's this person saying, well, I'm trying to make sense of some things in our past, and I'm going to make the assumption that it's about our family dynamic. And instead of the sister saying, I've had some similar questions, or I haven't had that experience, but tell me what's behind your question, and going into that space with you, then they just call you a name. You're just a drama queen. Why would they do that? Now, if you're the kind of obsessive compulsive person that just keeps going back on and on and on, and you just simply can't be satisfied with any responses, okay, that's different. All right. But that's not what we're talking about here. For you to just simply say, I'd like to have some insight regarding my family past or relationship past. That's not wrong. And then for them to say you're a drama queen, um, why don't we say for the narcissist, uh, whenever you try to unpack psychological issues, whenever you try to unravel some of the why questions, keep in mind they're not known for being pensive or insightful or intuitive. And when I say intuitive, going inside and trying to nurture some of the whys behind the decisions that are being made. Instead, whenever they're having to look back at the past, they can feel ashamed or confused or angry. Certainly, they can be very dismissive, which is what this person is doing to you. And they can just say, I don't need to look at the past. You're just a drama queen. Or they can come up with some other crummy description. You're a moron, or you're an idiot, or you're a fill in the blank. And so this goes back to, again, knowing your audience. Uh, I like having a sense of history. Um, okay, going way back, I remember Richard Nixon was still president, and so Barbara Walters was just coming up on the scene as a up and coming reporter, and so she had an interview with Richard Nixon while he was still in office, but things were looking shaky, and she asked him, "What does it take to have the ability to be a good president?" Now, Nixon had a whole lot of problems, but he gave a good answer on this one question. And he looked at her and said, "Well, first, you need to have a keen sense of history. You need to know who you are now and where it's come from and what the roots are to your current set of circumstances so you can plan well for the future." And I thought, well, be nice for me to figure that out, a little bit better than he wound up doing, but that's a good answer. Knowing who we are, knowing what our past is, and knowing how we've been influenced by various themes that are part of our now experience, that helps us know how to move forward. And so, if you have a sister who says, "Well, I just think that's stupid, that's no good," then their need to blame, their need to criticize merely says, "I fear insight. I fear what I might learn. I fear what I might have to admit. I fear vulnerability." All of that is in play. And so just remind yourself, okay, when I'm trying to unpack my past, I guess my sister's not going to be somebody that's going to be a partner with me on that. So just leave it at that. Okay, here's another one. This is a tough one because it goes into the whole concept of trauma bonding and PTSD. And I know that some of you have really struggled with that. So let's go into this next question. This person says, "I'm going on 3 years out of my relationship with my covert ex man." And then she puts in the parentheses, "not deserving of the husband title." So, okay, her ex husband, which is her ex man. She says, "I'm still struggling with anxiety and depression, and I was diagnosed with PTSD." Okay, let's pause there. It breaks my heart when I know that somebody has entered into a marriage thinking, "Good, this is kind of what we planned for," or "This is something that I had really had high hopes for," only to find out then that this person is harsh, mean. Whenever it says I'm still struggling with anxiety and depression, it's just not what you want. And sometimes it can be such a shock to your system, and it all depends on how severe it was, that it just stays inside of you for quite some time. I mean, the concept of PTSD came out of war scenarios where people would come back from war, and a lot of times they just didn't get it out of their system, and they could break down crying when memories would come back and have flashbacks and things like that. That's what trauma is about. You can have it not just with war, but you can have it with grossly inappropriate relationships. And that's what we're hearing about here. So she goes on and says, "I'm having such a hard time moving on with my life. I would love it if you would help me know how I can respond to the naysayers. My family and friends who think that they have the cure for my problems. I can't stand it when they put a timeline on my healing." Okay. When someone implies you shouldn't be feeling what you feel, or when someone implies it's been long enough now, get over it. One of the things that illustrates is a gross lack of empathy coming from them toward you. And empathy is such a key component in the healing process. There are times when I was in my counseling office with people, when I would hear some of the stories that were being told to me, they were pretty awful. Some of them would be, and then in my mind, I'm thinking, I know we can get somewhere good, or else I wouldn't be in the profession that I'm in. And the same is here with you. This is a different type of therapeutic intervention, but in teaching and discussing these things and asking questions, it's part of our healing. I know we can get somewhere good with this. And then the rest of the story is everybody heals differently. And I would have the need as a therapist to figure out where that person is and to have the patience to allow them to kind of catch up with that healing process. And there are times when it takes 2 weeks before they start seeing the light. Sometimes it takes 2 years. In this lady's case, it was 3 years. I remember I had a situation with one lady, and I love her so much even now. I was a young therapist in my 30s, and she was having some real strain and difficulty. Won't get into the details, but relative to her family of origin and then a really awful marriage. And she was saying, well, they're telling me I have to take care of this and I've got to do it right away. I just looked at her and I said, well, what if we were just to say, we're going to love you knowing that you have that strain upon you and that anxiety, and we don't have a timetable for you. And she just broke down and began crying. It's like, really? I said, yeah. I mean, we don't have a timetable. When you're ready to make the necessary adjustments, then you can just let me know, and we'll get there. Well, she continued for some sessions, and then I didn't hear from her for a while. 8 years later, she called me back. And she said, do you remember that conversation about, when I'm ready? I said, oh, yeah, I remember. And she said, I'm ready. 8 years later. And we had some really productive work that we did. Actually, she had some family members who came along with her that joined her that would not have been available 8 years prior. Do you understand what I'm saying? People heal differently, and we don't want to put a time frame on it. And if you've been through stress and duress, my heart says, let's love you in the midst of it. Let's not require that you have to have everything complete, tied down, finished in its place. Let's just love you. And then when you're ready, what we're going to do is we're going to say, well, then let's break it down. And if you have people that would like to join you, that's wonderful. It's essential that you have that support system, but most important, it's essential that you learn to accept yourself right where you are. Okay. Now, like this woman did, she sought therapy. Part of it stuck with her in the early stage. Later on, she came back and kind of finished some of her tasks. So don't feel like you have to put a time frame on it. And if others just say, "Well, you should be over this," it's like, well, why don't you go through what I did, for 15 years or whatever it was, then get back with me and we'll talk. Uh, Accept yourself and then seek the support that you need. Okay. Um, one of the taking an aside, one of the biggest privileges that I had in 41 years of working with people in my therapy office is people would just put it out there, sometimes in a gut wrenching way. Here's how I'm hurting. And I would think, what a privilege. What a privilege it is to be able to hear people at their point of need and to say, first and foremost, when you walk into this office, when you're in my presence, you're going to be in the presence of someone who sees you as worthy. Okay. And that is with or without perfect solutions being in place, you're a person of worth. And I'm hoping that you can receive that into yourself. And as you experience others who also struggle, send that message to them too. I suspect it'll be greatly appreciated. I mean that down to the core of my being too. Okay, here's another person. Kind of a similar thought. How do I know if I'm normal or not when I become anxious and feel helpless to explain myself? In other words, here I am back trying to defend who I am. My therapist tells me I'm codependent. Now, I'm going to give that therapist some slack because I don't know how it was said or in what tone and all. Yeah, there could be some codependence going on there. If you have been exposed to somebody who has some real difficulty with you and they treat you poorly, and then you have anxiety, codependency means that each person in the equation, that's the co part. There's they get into an emotional feeding frenzy where you feed off of me, I feed off of you. I wind up not being the person I want to be because of your response, and then you do the same in reverse. That's the whole codependent. And yes, there can be much of that when you have been rejected or when you have been on the receiving end of anger and arguing and accusations. So then the question is, how do I know if I'm normal? The answer is, well, when somebody harms you, you feel hurt. And part of hurt can come out as anxiety and helpless. And so again, we go back and say, would you be willing to give yourself some patience? It's normal to feel hurt when you are injured. And as a simple illustration, ask somebody who's had knee surgery, let's suppose, and the surgery is a success. They're back up, walking good. But then a year later, 5 years later, that a cold front comes through and that knee kind of aches a bit. It's normal. What you want to do, though, is you want to remind yourself, my injury is not the only thing about me that is true. Yes, I have been injured, but I also have positive characteristics. I have skills that I can draw upon. People enjoy my company, and you want to remind yourself of those things, and you stay away from the binary thinking that's common within narcissistic circles. When I say binary, all or nothing, black or white, you're either good or you're not good. And you allow yourself to live in the gray, knowing that as the weeks and then the months and the years and the decades go by, there's going to be more and more of that growth trajectory, and you're committed to it. I'm in my late 60s now, and I can promise you, I don't think exactly the same as I did when I was in my late 20s. Some things about me are the same, but some things are different. And over a 40-year period of time, whatever adjustments you might see in me didn't happen overnight. Same thing with you. Here you are, you're feeling anxious because of things that have happened to you, and you feel like you have to defend yourself for feeling that way. Um, give yourself the gift of patience, and be around people who will say, well, while you're doing it, I'm going to put my arm of support and encouragement around you. That's what I'm hoping you can set yourself up for, and I'm hoping you can be a giver of that as well as a receiver of that. Okay, here's a person that sounds like this person is feeling some guilt that's not necessary. And again, this is part of that defensiveness. Did I do the right thing? This person says, how do I get rid of the fear of the unknowns? I let go of my narcissistic parents, but now I worry a lot about the consequences. So this person says, well, I had a relationship with my parents that was so difficult that I had to let it go. I had to move on. And I'm making the assumption that there's been either a full no contact or a great pullback. And now this person's having some second guesses, and this goes back to how much are you supposed to defend yourself? And I think we want to ask, well, remind yourself now, why did you make the decision that you made? I'm going to assume that if you have pulled back completely from your own parents, it must have been very difficult. And I'm guessing it was very long standing. What was part of that decision now? And just remind yourself, you didn't arbitrarily say, yeah, I'm kind of tired of them, I'm just going to walk away. But I'm going to make the assumption that it was because of some very, very strained and difficult kinds of circumstances. And then you want to ask, well, do I have a sense that my parents have insight now? And they are willing to hear me, and they're willing to make adjustments and show the honor to me that was not shown, which is why I cut the ties. And if there is a really sincere apology and a sincere show of insight, then I'm always willing to say, okay, I'll listen. I know some people that have had some breaks with family members, and years later, adjustments were sufficient enough to where there was a form of restoration. But then the real big question is not what do you know about who they are, but what do you know about yourself? You pull back from your parents. You have a fear, which is what this anxiety is all about. The opposite of fear, by the way, is trust. And so my big question as you move forward is, well, do you trust yourself? Because that's the big question. Do you trust that you have proper intentions and motives? Because if that's the case, then it makes sense for you to say, then as uncomfortable or undesirable as the decision was to move on from very difficult parents, I trust my good judgment. I make sense. I don't do things just out of an arbitrary kind of reasoning. and I'm going to go ahead and give me permission to stand on the decision that I make. So this becomes an exercise in objectivity about who they are. And then it becomes an exercise in you saying, I need to learn to trust my gut, my reasoning, and my motives. Okay. Um, okay. One last question here. This person asks, is it reasonable to ghost the narcissist when they are under stress? Well, let's ask the opposite question. Is it reasonable to just stay there and take whatever mess they throw at you because they're under stress? No. If a narcissist is under stress and predictably, it's like, oh, this never has worked out well, and I feel it coming on. I don't want to have to go through some of the garbage that I've had to go through in times past. I'm getting out of here. That's not a bad thing. Now they can say, "Get back over here and let me vomit on you some more." Like, no, that vomit smelled bad, and I don't like that. So I'm not going to do that. Is it okay for you to ghost them? Sometimes you just have to take good care of yourself because that narcissist who's under stress and is probably not on their best behavior because of that, they're sure not going to take care of you. So is it okay to pull back? We call that setting boundaries. And for you to say, I choose not to be in the presence of someone who is going to take initiative to make me feel miserable, I think that's reasonable. So, sticking with our theme, how much should you defend yourself with a narcissist? The answer is not much. Explain yourself some, just to know that you illustrate to yourself, if nobody else, that you're open to objective communication. But then understand we're dealing with people who have such a commitment to the false self. You've heard me say that many times. Okay, what's the key word? False. And what they say, what they think is not grounded in truth, but they're trying to come at you as if they're the arbitrators of truth. Know what you're dealing with, and then learn to have that sense that says, I give me permission to be me. If I'm struggling, if I have more growth, I give myself permission to do it in the pace that makes sense to me. And then if the narcissist says, well, I just think you're an idiot, it's like, yeah, I realize that. I don't think that way, but you do. I'm under no requirement to make you change. My one requirement is I'm going to be true to me. Can you go with that with me? Go with me on that, Team Healthy? All right. Hey, look, we made it through the entire time without the gremlins getting into the computers, and also, yay, good victory. And we've got some really interesting videos coming up, so keep your eye out for that. And I tell you this, and I say this to my wife. I am so grateful. I've been doing this on YouTube now for almost 4.5 years. I'm so grateful that I get to do what I do, and I get to respond to the questions that you send in. It's an honor for me to hear from you. It's an honor for me that you would allow me to be in your journey with you. And so we're in this together. I'm a fellow sojourner. I want to learn from people, which is why I have folks like Shannon Thomas and Dr. Simon and the others that we've had. Ingrid Clayton, I loved her interview that we had. We're all learners together, aren't we? And let's encourage each other as we move forward. And I shall see you. Let's see. Next week is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Let's go ahead and do that, okay? And we'll go ahead and have one. I know some of you may be on the road. Some of you over there in Europe are thinking, "Man, I wish I could go over to America and have some turkey." Or those of you who are down under, and just grab some turkey at the grocery store. Think about us. I'll see you next week. Bye.